TOK Essay Title number 1, May 2024. You need help? I got help, and I got you something free that you can download right now. I'm going to give you all of my notes. Let's get an A in TOK.
Get an A in TOK.
I'm going to take you through my personal notes, but I'm doing one better than I did last year. I'm going to give you my notes. You can just look in the description, take a link, and download the PDF that I'm going to go through right now. I've got a lot of more stuff to give you though. First of all, if you need extra help, you can send me your essay. I will help you out. You can check me out at fiverr.com/PatFreakinJones. Also, if you want some free organizers, some free examples, check out getana.tok.com/free stuff. I got so much free stuff to give you there. Then finally, TOK Masterclass, a fully on-demand TOK course with a teacher, this guy, you know, me, the guy who doesn't suck. So if you're sick of TOK, if you don't know what you just learned, I got the entire course for you. You can take it with me. YouTube subscriber is the coupon code. You save 25% off of that. So download my notes. Let's get started. All right, so here I am in the notes. You can see my little encouraging thing. I hope you don't get a B. I want you to get an A. If you don't have any money, this whole thing's free. Let's take a look at title number 1. Is subjectivity overly celebrated in the arts, but unfairly condemned in history? Discussed with reference to the arts and history. This is kind of nice because a lot of students just wasted a lot of time thinking about what their AOKs are going to be. This is easy. They tell you what you're gonna do, okay? So a couple of thoughts on the title. Now, if you haven't watched my full title breakdown yet, what are you doing watching this video? Watch the title breakdown, okay? But here's a couple of thoughts I came up with in the days that I've been preparing these videos. So first of all, we want to make sure that we focus on the keywords: overly celebrated and unfairly condemned. I know that we're talking about subjectivity, but a lot of people are gonna just talk about times when subjectivity is celebrated and times when subjectivity is condemned. That's not what the title is asking. Honestly, that's super easy. It's overly celebrated and unfairly condemned. And this is gonna lead to some really easy ways of organizing here. Don't do that, don't be basic. Let me give you the basic organization that like 90% of people are gonna use. They're gonna have an example in the arts when it was overly celebrated, and then an example in the arts when it was not overly celebrated. Then in history, we're gonna go to when it was unfairly condemned, then when it's not unfairly condemned. They're gonna summarize their thesis and their main points and basically write a 7th grade essay. That's not what you're gonna do because we're gonna check out some good ideas here. So just talking about these points won't score highly. The goal of your analyst, I misspelled analysis. In conclusion, is to come up with a lesson, statement, position, or insight about your subjectivity. Let me give you my number 1 piece of advice that I give people who pay me to read their essays, fiverr.com/PatFreakinJones. I say your conclusion sucked because you wasted 200 words telling me things you already said. Totally cool in 7th grade. You're not in 7th grade. So what you want to do is give me a lesson. Tell me an insight. Leave me with something that shows that shows me, the examiner, not that I'm an examiner, that you are smart. I am. Don't tell anybody. This is totally copy too. Okay, so here would be a good organization. A good organization starts with the arts, and then we do the 2 same things. A time when it's overly celebrated and a time when it's not overly celebrated. But then we give an insight about subjectivity. Here are some examples. I'm just gonna collapse my paper. So you could say subjectivity is the most important thing in art, drawing back to when it was in these examples. You could also say it's overrated. It's gone too far. Experts help us understand it. It should not be celebrated. It should be celebrated. There's so many different things that you can do. But instead of just saying, going back to the top, is it? It's a yes or no title. Say, yes, it is. No, it isn't. And here's what we learned about subjectivity from my example. So give me a so what, an aha, an analytical statement that says, I researched this and this, therefore I conclude this. Looking at history, again, we've got the 2 basic paragraphs, but then we're gonna go, it's not harmful because, or no matter what, it's not inevitable, or maybe it is inevitable. What we can also talk about is it shouldn't be condemned because, so you're kind of making a value statement there, okay? So I really wanna encourage you to go past the super basic 4-body paragraph essay and try to insert one other section in each of your AOK sections. Okay. Moving on, let me give you some examples because I know that's what you're here for. Basic examples to avoid. Avoid the people that are used all of the time, okay? Everyone's gonna do Jackson Pollock. It's subjective, it can mean whatever it wants. Who cares? Everyone knows that. That doesn't take any research. One of the things that I tell people all the time, if something came to your head and you didn't need to learn anything else about it, you were able to put it in your essay without any more research. A million other people are also doing that. So don't do it. If you get an idea that comes to your head off the bat, that's great. Use it, but research it more. So these are not bad examples, but they will be overused, I promise. It's just arts is the biggest section where people don't research and just pull stuff that they know that they didn't have to really think about or work. So remember that we're talking about subjective art is only the beginning. So don't just talk about, hey, this art is subjective. We know it's subjective, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whether or not the subjectivity is overly celebrated. So we are making the assumption that subjectivity is celebrated. So we need to look at the people who are celebrating subjectivity or not. So here's some good examples. I put all the links here in the document as well. So if you haven't downloaded it yet, I don't know why you're downloading it. So I'm just gonna click on the link. Let's go with, yeah, there we go. So this is an art exhibition art. This is just crap, honestly, where she took her bed and called it art. Now, I'm not just saying we talk about this, but in this reactions section, we get some really interesting reactions to this very subjective piece of art. Really interesting there. Okay, the next thing is I'm gonna provide an example that I would use. I don't think you should choose this at all, okay? Instead, what you want to do is think about a piece of art that you have experienced that was really subjective and it was celebrated. So I watched this movie called The Green Knight. I hated it. It was awful, but I read all of these different reviews that were talking about how great it was because it was so subjective, or because I just didn't know what was going on. I'm a freaking English teacher, okay? So I didn't really understand it because of its subjectivity. So it was impossible to understand, but everybody celebrated how deep and meaningful it was. So my question would be, and you can answer this with any piece of art, is subjectivity overly celebrated if it led me and other people to being confused? Bob Dylan would be a great artist to study. So in this article, he says he doesn't want to be understood. That's really weird. Should we celebrate that or not? Bob Dylan is probably the most celebrated American musician of all time. So what are we supposed to do about him saying, I don't want to be understood? This is a great photo of Michael Jordan's last shot before he retired and came back. What just happened there? Okay, so this is a cool photo, and I remember seeing this photo and just being mesmerized with all of these faces right before he beat the Utah Jazz. Now, this is a photograph, and we can say this art, even though it's technically, photojournalism, we can talk about this piece of art. I accept. But here's the thing. This piece of art is not subjective at all. Okay, we can totally understand this is Michael Jordan taking a shot with 6.6 seconds left to win a game. With that said, it's beautiful. It's perfect. No subjectivity is required to appreciate this. So this is one of the things that we can talk about. Is it overly celebrated? Yes, because it's not always necessary, but we tend to think that if art is going to be high art or art is going to be valuable, there has to be some sort of subjectivity to it. And I wouldn't say that that's the case. Let's see. Subjectivity has no place in this, yet the artwork is absolutely successful. So if some art is successful without being subjective, is subjective art actually that important? That's something that you can talk about. And you can disagree with me, and that's great. So what you will do is you'll bring up these examples and then tell me, what are we supposed to believe about subjectivity's role in the arts? Okay, let's move on to history. A couple important notes here. This is true for every single person who writes their essay about history. First of all, just avoid the Nazis. I do not want to see Nazis. I do not want to see the Nazis. I say that every time. It's not funny. Some interesting things with World War II can work, okay? But avoid anything in history that comes to your mind without doing research. Whenever I'm reading a paper and Nazis come up, my first thought is, this student didn't do any work, okay? So just make sure that you are actually doing the research. Okay, now the most important thing. The AOK of history is not just things that happened in the past. The AOK of history deals with how experts use tools to learn about the past. We are focused on their subjectivity and whether or not it is unfairly condemned when using these tools. So to do this, you must find historians that were and weren't subjective. Now let me give you a spoiler. I think that when we're looking at anything in history, subjectivity has to exist, whether it's the historians learning about it or it's the tools that we are using. Subjectivity is everywhere, so I don't think it can be condemned because it can't be avoided. So here's some good examples and approaches. Remember, we need to find people condemning the subjectivity and interpretation. There's the historic event, that's the first thing you gotta find. Then the subjectivity that was applied, that's the second thing you gotta find. Then the condemning. Then you analyze by saying whether or not this subjectivity was unfairly condemned. So that's actually pretty tough, okay? So just make sure you're doing all parts of the title, not just saying, here's something that was condemned, here's something that was not condemned. That's not what you wanna do. So interpretations about using the atomic bomb in Japan, that should be bolded. Was it an unjust use of power? No. Or did it save lives by preventing a land invasion? Yes. But I'm subjective, I'm biased. How does subjectivity come into play as historians interpret something that cannot be known? That's what I would really focus on. A lot of history is just us making a very, very, very educated guess about things that happened in the past based on the information available to us. So subjectivity will always be there. Related to that, I use this example in the TOK exhibition videos. When we try to think about what ended the Great Depression, in America, traditionally we have said that this government program called the New Deal ended the Great Depression, but we don't know. So my question is, and if you see my videos in the exhibition, you can just reuse this idea. When we're looking at events that will never occur again, we have to be subjective and we have to interpret. So if there is something that the Great Depression and the New Deal and World War II, we're probably never going to deal with those three things like at that magnitude happening ever again. We'll have worse things. But if we're talking about those things happening, we're having to be subjective because we can't look at new pieces of information that are coming out today. So is that good? Bad? What are we supposed to do about that? The next thing, this is great. Let me give you a little disclaimer. If you are not American, you need to learn more about American politics before you write about American politics. The best thing you can do is write about politics in your own country because first of all, you know more about that. But secondly, you're using your own perspective and that's always more valuable. But there's this really interesting thing. The 1619 Project, which was created by the New York Times, and the 1776 Commission, which was created by Donald Trump's idiot people who, they just don't like, they're dumb. But basically, these two different programs for education were completely subjective and went in two different directions to describe the birth of America, slavery, and how those two things really work together. But here's the thing. The 1619 Project won a Pulitzer Prize. It was praised. The 1776 Commission was condemned, and you'll see that in this article right here. Let me just click on it right now so you can read this article, and there is so much stuff that you can find. So you can visit the 1619 website. It's on the New York Times, and I'm sure you can find somewhere the 1776. There's the New York Times. I don't know if the 1776 Commission website still exists because the Biden administration would have taken it down, but you can read a whole lot about it here. But the important thing, going back, is that one was condemned and one was praised, despite both of them being subjective. I think this would be a great example. You'll need to read a little bit, but if you really research this, anybody from any country could talk about this. Okay, I use Herodotus a lot. Herodotus is somebody that we really say is the first historian, but when we study him, we know that he's biased. So if he's subjective, if we're looking at the tool, the method that we're learning from Herodotus. If we understand that he's subjective, should we actually condemn that when he's the only tool that we have? And then related to that, you can look at Roman history because the Roman history, the historians were the people with power. So they were being subjected too. So Josephus and Pliny are two resources that we use to learn about early Christianity. Josephus, a Roman Jew, definitely not Christian. So he's subjective. Pliny was the emperor of Rome. His position on Christianity, definitely subjective. But in the absence of, the internet 2,000 years ago, do we use these subjective tools? Absolutely. Their views are absolutely subjective, yet they are used all the time. So you need to tell me why, and why is this not condemned? Why are both of these guys mostly considered to be good sources? Okay, let's move on to the conclusion now, just a couple of different ideas. What you want to do is comment on the nature of subjectivity. So think about this. Everything leading up into your conclusion is setting you up to tell your reader something about subjectivity. It's praised in the arts, it's condemned in history. Is that even fair? Is it good? Should that happen? What should we decide? One thing I might bring up is subjectivity avoidable at all? Should we even try to avoid it, or should we embrace it? Should we just acknowledge it and say, yes, I'm subjective, but I'm trying not to be subjective? Then what you can go into is subjectivity even bad at all? Tie your two AOKs together. The last thing that I suggest that you might do is compare them in the conclusion. What is the difference between subjectivity in the arts and subjectivity in history? Is there any difference? Yeah, probably so. But what you might want to do is come to the same conclusion or the same lesson when you are bringing those two together. So those are my thoughts about Title I. I really like this title. If you need more help, hit me up. Look in the links in the description. Download this document. Share this with anybody that you want. I'm here to help. We can Zoom. I do Zoom tutorials. You can connect with me, send me your essay, and then we'll look at it together. I got so many ways to help you out. I hope the TOK sucks a little bit less now than it did at the beginning of this video. I'll see you next time.